Greetings, Twelves. This is Corbin Smith, Emerald City Spectrum. Glad to be joined by Dan Viens of Seahawks Forever here from training camp practice number 9. Dan, your first opportunity to lay eyes on the 2026 Seahawks in person. And in particular, I know that there was one player that was standing out to you compared to when you were here at camp a year ago, Jalen Milro.
Yeah, first of all, it's great to be here. It's good to see you again. There's nothing like being up close, seeing these guys, putting your eyes on them, and then being here in person, you get to feel them as well. And that was the first thing that stood out to me. I mean, I've been reading about, your coverage and others through the first 8 days of camp.
Yep.
And it seems pretty evident that Jaylen Milro has been making more plays on a daily basis. But to see him now and see all the reps he took today, the comfort level that he has playing quarterback right now seems night and day to me compared to what I saw a year ago. And then to see just the whole evolution, the first time I laid eyes on him at the Senior Bowl practices in Mobile a year ago where he did not have a good week, and then to see the progression ultimately to him getting drafted, I thought he looked comfortable, in command, and even when the pocket would break down at times, he would feel pressure. He wasn't quick to bail out of the pocket. Really seems intent on standing in and delivering the football. And I thought, for the most part, I can't even think of an exception, unless it happened when I was turned away. I thought he was incredibly accurate all day long. Even at the end when they did the call-out period and they did some of those fun one-on-ones, they had him throwing all those footballs. And he was throwing dimes and laying the ball exactly where it needed to be. Big difference for me in Jalen Milro a year ago to now.
Yeah, that was a huge difference the last week watching Jalen Milroe because I was critical in OTAs and minicamp. I felt like he had taken a step back and the ball was flying all over the place. But now that I've had a chance to kind of put all the pieces together here, Dan, it seems like now it's more of it's a confidence and letting it rip. And I think that was impacting his accuracy as much as anything. He is now confidently scanning the field and he's rearing back and he isn't holding anything back. When he has his read, he is unloading it. And that is a night and day difference even from the first couple of days of training camp. And it just seems like the light switch has kind of come on. So that's been a lot of fun to watch. And we got to see him run around a few times today. He's still very fast.
Absolutely, yeah. Still really quick to the corner. And the cool thing then was got to see it. And then we got to hear from Brian Fleury, offensive coordinator, of course, for the first time today. And when I got a chance to ask him about where he felt Jalen was in his progression, he's talked about the ability to play the quarterback position. He didn't talk about mechanics. He didn't talk about, accuracy issues that have plagued him kind of throughout the process. It was how he processes, how quickly he gets to the line, the decisions he's making in the pocket. As you mentioned, he talked about his ability to play the quarterback position, and he spoke very, very highly of him.
Yeah, and he made it very clear as far as sub packages, if we're going to see Jalen Milroe in that capacity this year, hey, that could be a possibility if he is active, but it's going to depend on how he plays the quarterback position. It isn't going to be about his speed. It isn't going to be about, this could be a wildcat package. Can he play the quarterback position? Can we put him into the game and be confident that we can run our whole playbook with him? That's what Brian Fleury indicated today, and that's how it should be. You shouldn't be throwing him in there if you have concerns or reservations in that regard. The other thing that was interesting with Brian Fleury, and we've noticed this throughout training camp, a lot of people asking, what's the difference between this iteration of the Shanahan offense and the one we saw with Clint Kubiak a year ago? To me, the biggest thing structurally has been the use of two-back sets, and that's even been with Robbie Oots out, and we don't know where that's heading. That still remains to be seen, but we've gotten to see we've gotten to see what Brady Russell's been able to do out there in the offense, playing that fullback position, getting out into the tight end spot. That's what is going to be really fascinating to see how this plays out. But we've seen more two-back sets, and it's all about the ability to dictate things to the defense a little bit, force them to have to account for that extra gap and the things that come from using the fullback. And they even are mixing in two-back with two running backs in the backfield. We saw George Holani and Janarian Price today doing that, and Fleury made that evident, say, hey, we're going to find ways to get that second back on the field, but it might not be a traditional fullback all the time. We might move a tight end back there. They've been doing that. We might move a second running back like a George Holani or an Emmanuel Wilson who is built like a traditional fullback. They're going to be mixing and matching to get those two-back looks, which that further complicates things for the opposing coordinator when you have different bodies with different skills back there.
Yeah, and it's a good thing they don't need another traditional type fullback to fill in for Robbie Oots because they just aren't. They don't exist. They just don't grow on trees. There aren't that many of them. And I was fascinated also when Fleury talked about that concept behind the podium today on how it's not always going to look. First of all, he called himself a traditionalist. He said he kind of prefers two-back stuff, which warmed my heart as an old football fan. But it's not always just going to be, lining up two backs with I formation, a guy that's obviously playing the fullback position. We saw a lot of this today. We saw a lot of tight ends lining up in line and then motioning into the backfield just before the snap. And then after the snap or shortly before it, man, I love the stuff we're seeing from him with the motions. A lot of creative motion where the fullback will start one way and then reverse the next, and the running back gets to follow and work off of his blocks. A really cool play today where Jadarian Price had a nice little run working off Brady Russell's butt. Just like I said, really warmed my heart to hear Brian Fleury talk about two backs. This is something that I've wanted for a long time. Now, we never got to have it because of injuries. But during those years where Chris Carson and Rashad Penny crossed over, man, I would lay awake dreaming at times about seeing both of those guys in the backfield at the same time. We might get an opportunity, it sounds like, to see a lot more of that this year.
Yeah, and I think, it depends on Robbie Utz's situation, too. That could make it more of a necessity if they're wanting two back if he's not healthy. Again, we don't know the injury. We don't know if it's related to the neck issue that kept him out of the NFC title game in the Super Bowl last year. That remains to be seen. Speaking of warming of the heart, I don't know that there's a player in this practice field that warms Aden Durday's heart more than Rylie Mills. And maybe I'm in second gear in that. I've been all over the 98 train, really, since we saw him get onto the field last year. I loved him at Notre Dame for the ACL injury. But he continues to stand out, and not just because he towers over a lot of guys out here. I mean, he's a big man, but also very effective at penetrating into the backfield. We saw a couple of would-have-been sacks in today's practice. Obviously, he can't hit the quarterbacks in these practice periods with their retro blue uniforms on, but 98 playing from the three-tech, knows we get to see him as a big end. They're moving him around, and he is continuing to be disruptive. Sounds like he's going to have a very big role on this defensive line in year two.
It's one of the things I wanted to see the most, getting to be here in person today. And remember at the beginning where I talked about how you can feel these guys when you get to see them up close? I felt Rylie Mills today all throughout the practice. He was, as you mentioned, a consistent force. Didn't matter where he was lining up, as you said, or who he was lining up against. He was getting pressure. He was getting penetration. The motor is exactly what you see on tape. And that's, whenever I'm watching guys in prep for the draft, scouting players, you want to see that the skills that you liked, that they showed you in college, translate to the NFL. They don't always. But that motor that he has, along with the active hands and the quickness off the snap, and he's got light feet for a guy his size, you saw it show up. And then at the end of practice, we got to see the one-on-one stuff, the call-outs, as they call them, right, where they call guys up to challenge each other. And we saw a pretty epic battle between Mason Richmond and Rylie Mills.
We did, yeah. I don't know if it was quite on par with Bradford versus Mills last week, but this was a call-out, so it was literally one rep. They actually get to go against each other twice. They called him out for a second one. And first rep, I'd probably be leaning towards Rylie Mills winning it at the very end.
It was close to a draw.
It was close to a draw. The second one, it really was an incredible display of strength by Mason Richmond, to the point that Rylie Mills actually got frustrated at the end. And we almost had a little bit of a dust-up here.
Saw a little forearm to the face mask there, but everything, cooler heads prevailed.
And Mike McDonald made sure of that, ending practice right then and there. That was the final snap that we had on the field.
You might be seeing that rep on Hard Knocks next week.
You may very well be seeing that on episode. That would be episode 2 that would be showing up on there. So certainly we're getting to see Rylie Mills. And then the young DBs. I really enjoyed, I think Aden Durde does a really good job for a coordinator, kind of pulling the curtains back on how he feels about things. Some coordinators are very coy in their responses. He's not in that company. He does a pretty good job of opening up, behind the curtain, how I feel about a player. And hearing what he thought of the young DBs, in particular Michael Dansby, and I've been talking about him a lot in this training camp, had a kind of a rough day yesterday, but I thought he came out today and made a number of plays, got his hands on the football, and you could see Aden Durde's eyes get much bigger mentioning Michael Dansby. You can't wait to see him in a game situation where he has to tackle, because clearly he's been impressed. And Andre Fuller's also getting some work in the slot. So first time we're seeing one of the rookies get to move inside and out. He played primarily boundary at Toledo, but he did have prior experience in the slot when he was at Arkansas Pine Bluff many years ago at the FCS level. So not a complete novice, but that is still at the NFL level. Going to be a jump, but he's had a couple pass breakups in the last few practices playing in there. It adds some intrigue to these rookie corners, especially since we unfortunately haven't gotten to see Julian Neal back out here yet with a leg injury.
Yeah, Neil not in pads today. He was just observing. But man, seeing Michael Dansby up close, talking about translating traits from college to the pros. I got to be honest, and I mentioned this after the draft. I wasn't familiar with Michael Dansby. I obviously was familiar with some of his teammates in that secondary.
Yep.
Genesis Smith, Traden Stukes, of course, who I thought was high on the Seahawks board probably if things had gone a certain way in the draft. But what I saw on tape from Dansby when I got a chance to study him was he's incredibly twitchy and so quick to break on the football. And we saw several examples of that today where the receiver runs a nice route, makes a break, comes back to the football, and Dansby is able to react to it and then makes a play on the ball and knocks the ball out. And that's something that it sounds simple. It sounds like, well, it's probably required for any defensive back if you want to play in the NFL, but some guys just don't have that skill, right? He really does. He sees it, he reacts to it, and he makes plays on the ball. And as I mentioned to you just a few moments ago, if this kid makes enough plays in preseason, he was off the radar, he gets on the radar. He's one that just feels like a guy that might be kind of tough to get through waivers at the cut to 53.
Yeah, that's going to be fascinating because he has the traits, he has the fluidity athletically, and he gets his hands on the football. Those are the things that stand out for corners that could get picked up off waivers. So we'll see what happens. I think he's the dark horse right now for that number 3 corner spot. He hasn't climbed up quite enough to maybe be viewed as a real threat to Nehemiah Pritchett right now, but and maybe Noah Igbenogany as well. But feels like he is that dark horse that is catching up, and he is at least in the peripheral to get his name in there. Real quick, a couple other things that stood out in regard to what you and I were seeing today. I got to keep mentioning the old standby Cooper Kupp because I just feel like we are potentially in for one of those crazy scenarios where you have a guy in his early 30s that's been in the league for 9-10 years that had somewhat of a down statistical season. I thought Cooper Kupp played well last year. He just didn't get a lot of targets, and then comes back and a year older comes out and puts up bigger numbers. All he did today was have 2 red zone touchdowns. He looks really spry, even compared to last year. He's 2 years removed from that last injury. I could see Cooper Kupp having a bigger role in this offense, which is crazy with all the other weapons that they have they could throw the football to. I could see him go out and get 60 catches this year for this offense.
Yeah, and the thing about today, the plays he was making, he was open. You know, what we saw a lot last year from Cooper Kupp was made a lot of tightly contested catches where Sam threads the needle and he just catches the ball so well. We know that about him. He was getting open, which suggests to me that he's a little more explosive maybe in his lower half. Remember last year he was coming off an injury-riddled season in his last year in Los Angeles, lower body injuries. Sometimes it takes a little time to get back to 100%. Now he's had his second full healthy offseason, and it shows. And he's the old man. But there's some young guys, too, that maybe he's rubbing off on a little bit because I'll tell you, we got to hear from Jay Harbaugh today. We heard from all the coordinators, and there was a lot of discussion about the battle for some of the gunner positions right at the end of that wide receiver room. Irv Charles, who they traded for, and Emmanuel Henderson, who they drafted, who we know is a special teams demon. But Ricky White III, who they drafted last year, was an seventh rounder. Seventh rounder out of UNLV. Highly productive receiver in college, but his calling card was special teams. And I remember last year, after watching him for a month in training camp, I reported that I thought he looked like an NFL receiver. Just got caught up in a numbers game. Came over to Corbin about an hour into practice day. I said, Ricky White looks like an NFL receiver. He made some plays today on some beautifully thrown balls. Thought his route running looked a little bit tighter, and we know he can play special teams, and that might be, it's going to be tough to crack this roster as a receiver, especially if Jake Bobo gets healthy and gets back out there again. But that special teams calling card of his, those 3 guys, they might be battling for a roster spot. Maybe they're battling for a practice squad elevation on game day. But that's probably the thing that's going to make the decision between those 3. I thought they all had moments today, but I thought Ricky White had a really smooth day.
Yeah, I think you can look at Ricky White, Emmanuel Henderson, Irv Charles. I think you can throw Montorie Foster Jr. into that category. He's looked really good, had another great practice today. So that 6th receiver spot, or a practice squad priority receiver spot, is very much up for grabs. And you've got 4, maybe 5 guys that are in the mix there, depending on Jake Bobo's situation. I would expect he's going to be back sooner rather than later from what Mike McDonald has said, but was not on practice field today, at least in uniform. But everybody was celebrating his birthday from the berm today and making sure that Jake Bobo knew that he was being thought of. But that is a wide open race. There's no question about it. The Seahawks will be back in action tomorrow for their 10th practice, should be back in pads as they head into the middle of the second week of training camp. For Emerald City Spectrum, I'm Corbin Smith. Seahawks Forever, Dan Viens. Thanks for tuning in.